I still remember the sound of the door slamming shut. Not just any door, my family's door. The one with the oak frame, polished brass knob, and 25 years of memories behind it. That door closed on me forever the day I said a yes. To the one man they swore I was never allowed to love them. My name is Isabelle Turner. I grew up in a wealthy family in Connecticut, with a silver spoon in my mouth and expectations carved into marble. My father was a finance mogul, my mother an Ivy League professor, and I was supposed to marry a senator's son. Instead, I chose Daniel. I met Daniel in the most unassuming way, at a local bookstore in New Haven. He was in the corner, flipping through a worn-out copy of Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. Our eyes met, a shared smirk at the chaos of the kids' storytime nearby, and that was it. There was something about him, quiet, steady, grounded, that pulled me in like gravity. Yet he wore simple clothes, worked at a nearby mechanic's garage, and drove a dented Toyota Corolla that coughed more than it purred. When I told my mother I had met someone, she asked if he rode for Yale. When I said he fixed transmissions, she hung up on me. I brought him home for Thanksgiving. That was my first mistake. The tension in the room could have sliced through glass. My father, Harold Turner, looked at Daniel like he was chewing on something sour. My mother only asked one question the entire night. So, what exactly do you do, Daniel? When he said he was a mechanic, she blinked slowly and offered him a roll like she was feeding a stray dog. After the disaster that was Thanksgiving, I was given an ultimatum: end it, or don't come back. I didn't hesitate. I packed a single suitcase, walked out the same door I had grown up behind, and moved into Daniel's tiny apartment above the garage. It smelled like oil and pine-scented soap. The bed was too small, the windows drafty, but I had never felt more at peace. But there was one thing I didn't know about Daniel: that he wasn't just a mechanic. He owned the garage, and 10 others across the state. It started years ago, he told me, over late-night noodles and reruns of Seinfeld. He had inherited a rundown auto shop from his uncle when he was 22. Instead of selling it, he learned the business and built it slowly into a small empire. I wasn't interested in his net worth. I was in love with his mind, his integrity, and how he always picked up stray cats from the street. But a part of me couldn't ignore the irony. My family had disowned me for marrying beneath them, yet Daniel's company was now worth more than the entire Turner family trust. We had it in the backyard of one of Daniel's properties, a gorgeous vineyard he had quietly purchased 2 years earlier. It was small, intimate, filled with laughter, wild flowers, and the smell of fresh bread. My parents didn't come. Neither did my brother. I didn't cry. Not that day. 6 months later, my father's company faced a massive financial scandal. Stocks plummeted, investors pulled out, and suddenly, the once mighty Turner fortune was bleeding from every direction. That's when I got the call. It was my mother. She sounded tired. Meek. Not the iron-willed woman I remembered, curious yet cautious. I agreed to meet them for coffee. They danced around pleasantries, until my father finally admitted, "We've had some financial troubles." My mother followed quickly. "We understand Daniel's business is quite successful. Would he be interested in assisting?" I stared at them in disbelief. "You mean the same Daniel you called a grease monkey?" I asked. My voice was calm, but every word landed like a hammer. "The same man you disapproved of because he didn't wear a Rolex?" They didn't respond. I stood up and left without finishing my coffee. Later that night, I told Daniel what happened. He didn't get angry. He never did. Instead, he just kissed my forehead and went back to washing dishes. That was Daniel. Quiet thunder. A year later, Daniel was featured in a business magazine, The Quiet King of Auto Repair, how one man built a $60 million business without saying a word. My parents saw it. Everyone did. Suddenly, they were sending invitations, apologies, gift baskets. My brother even wanted to co-invest in a startup, but we declined every single offer, not out of revenge, but because we had moved on. Daniel and I bought a farmhouse outside town. We planted a garden, rescued cats, laughed more than we used to, slept better, too. Every morning, he'd make me coffee in that chipped blue mug we bought at a yard sale. We found beauty in the quiet. Fulfillment. In the life we built together, but peace doesn't erase memory. And sometimes, memory visits when you least expect it. A few months after the magazine feature, I was invited to speak at a local women in business panel, mostly entrepreneurs, small business owners, and professionals. I agreed, reluctantly. I never saw myself as the public speaking type, but something in me wanted to tell my story. Not for sympathy, but for anyone, who might be sitting where I once sat, torn between love and legacy. The day of the event, I walked into a room full of polished ambition. Blazers, notepads, LinkedIn-ready smiles. I sat in the back. Until they called my name. As I approached the mic, I saw a familiar face in the crowd. Damn white cousin Natalie. We hadn't spoken since the wedding I didn't invite her to. She used to be the only one in my family who truly saw me, and yet even she had stayed silent when I left. Her expression was unreadable. I told my story as honestly as I could. About the family name. The expectations. The heartbreak. The little apartment above the garage and the man who never once made me feel small. I didn't sugarcoat the pain, but I didn't glorify revenge either. I spoke about finding love where it wasn't expected, and strength where it wasn't obvious afterward. Natalie approached me. "I'm sorry," she said. Just that. No excuses. No justifications. I hugged her. Sometimes, that's all we need to begin again. Back at the farmhouse, spring was unfolding in slow-motion beauty. The cherry tree we planted last year had started to bloom. Daniel built raised beds for vegetables. We even added a chicken coop, though the hens were more decorative than productive. One Sunday afternoon, I received an envelope. No return address. Inside, a handwritten letter. "Isabelle, I was wrong. We were wrong. I see that now. If you ever decide you want to talk, or forgive me, I'll be here." Dad. I stared at it for a long time. Not angry. Not sad. Just, still. I didn't write back. Not yet. Some doors, once closed, take time to open again. And some remain closed because peace lives on the other side. One afternoon, Daniel and I were sitting on the porch, watching the sky go lavender behind the trees. He was sipping tea, flipping through an old motorcycle catalog, when he looked over at me. "You ever think about how different things could have been?" he asked. I smiled. All the time. If you'd listened to them, you'd probably be living in some penthouse, married to a guy who only wears cufflinks. And you'd be alone in a garage, talking to carburetors. He laughed. Fair. We didn't talk about money much. It wasn't what defined us. Sure, we were more comfortable now. Daniel's business had expanded internationally, quietly, sustainably. He never sought headlines. He just built. Like he always did, but sometimes, late at night, I'd look at him and wonder how many other people had looked right past him. Measured him by his clothes, his car, his hands stained with grease, and how many Isabelles never got the chance to find their Daniels? Then came the wedding invitation, my brother's. Apparently, he was marrying the daughter of a real estate tycoon from Manhattan. Classic. It came with a gold embossed card and a formal RSVP envelope. I stared at it for days. "You going?" Daniel asked one morning while trimming the lavender bushes. "I don't know," I said. "Would you regret not going?" That was the question. Part of me wanted to go, to show them who I had become, to walk in with Daniel by my side and remind them that I was no longer the black sheep. But another part of me whispered, "You don't need their approval anymore." In the end, I sent a note wishing you love and happiness on your day. We won't be attending, but we send our warmest regards, Isabelle and Daniel. That was enough. Years have passed now. My hair's a bit grayer at the temples. Daniel's added 2 more shops to his business, and I've started a nonprofit that helps young women launch their own businesses, especially those who've been dismissed or overlooked. Sometimes, when I speak to them, I see myself in their eyes, nervous, uncertain, hopeful. I tell them the truth. The world will try to measure you by your last name, your bank balance, your connections. Let them, then build anyway. Build a life that's quiet, but yours. A love that's real, not performative. A legacy not of wealth, but of courage, and above all, never let someone else's limited vision define the scope of your dreams. Point 1 of. The girls in my program, Alma, once asked me, was it hard to forgive them? Your family? I paused, unsure of what to say. It's still hard, I admitted. Forgiveness isn't a doorway. It's a path. Some days I walk it with ease. Other days, I sit at the edge and wait for the strength to take another step. She nodded like she understood. Maybe she did. A few weeks later, I got another letter. This time, not from my parents. It was from my Aunt Claire. She'd always been the quiet one at family dinners, neutral, observant, rarely outspoken. Her letter was short, but kind. To Isabelle, I was always proud of you, even when others weren't. I hope we can talk someday. No expectations. Just love, Claire. And for the first time, I felt something shift. Not forgiveness, but openness. I called her. We met at a tea shop halfway between our towns. She wore the same blue scarf she always did, and her eyes crinkled at the edges when she smiled. I always thought you were the brave one, she said, stirring honey into her chamomile. You followed your heart. Not many of us did. We talked for over 2 hours. She asked about Daniel. I told her everything. She cried when I said we'd rescued for more cats. It was the first time in a decade that someone from my family saw my life not with judgment, but with joy. One rainy evening, Daniel and I were sorting old boxes in the attic when I stumbled across a photo album. It was from my childhood, birthday parties, holidays, beach trips. There, tucked between 2 pages, was a photo of my father holding me on his shoulders, grinning. For a long moment, I just stared. Daniel looked over my shoulder. That you?
Yeah,
I said softly. That was before everything got complicated. I placed the album back in the box but kept the photo. Later that night, I pinned it to the corkboard in my office, not as a shrine, not as a wound, but as a marker. A reminder that even fractured stories start with love, and sometimes, that love can live quietly beside the hurt without canceling it out. That spring, our nonprofit expanded. We launched a mentorship program, offering young women not just funding but guidance, something I wish I'd had when I was standing on the edge of my old life, uncertain and afraid. Alma, now flourishing with her own digital marketing agency, became one of our first mentors. Watching her step into that role made something warm settle in my chest. A full circle moment, as if the girl I once was could finally rest. Daniel surprised me with a custom-built shed next to our garden. It's your writing space now, he said, his grin betraying the pride he tried to downplay. You've got too many stories bottled up. I laughed. Are you trying to turn me into a novelist? Maybe, he winked. Or maybe I just want you to finally tell the whole world what you've been through. So I did. I started writing. Not for money, not even for recognition, but because for years, my voice had been silenced, my story rewritten by people who never bothered to ask how it felt. Now, I wanted to own it. Word by word, I began stitching myself back together. The stories I published on our nonprofit's blog started gaining traction. Young women across the country wrote to me, some in college, some working 2 jobs, some with dreams bigger than their bank accounts. They all said the same thing: you made me feel seen. One message in particular stood out. It was from a girl named Priya, whose parents threatened to cut her off if she didn't break up with her boyfriend, a barista with ambitions of opening his own roastery. She wrote, I thought walking away from their money meant walking away from everything. But your story helped me see it's just the beginning. Thank you. I cried reading that, not because it was sad, but because it reminded me of myself, standing at that crossroads, heart pounding, the weight of legacy versus love crushing my chest. If I could help even one woman choose herself, it was worth everything. I'd lost. One foggy Sunday morning, as Daniel and I sipped coffee on the porch, a familiar car pulled into the long gravel driveway. My mother stepped out. No entourage. No designer handbag. Just her and an umbrella. I didn't move. Neither did Daniel. She stood at the edge of the porch and looked up at me. I don't expect you to forgive me, she said. Her voice was smaller than I remembered. But I had to see you. I had to see him. Daniel rose slowly. He didn't say a word. Just offered a hand, an unspoken gesture of peace. To my surprise, she took it. We sat for a while, the three of us, saying almost nothing. But sometimes silence is where the healing begins. She asked to walk through the garden. I showed her the cherry trees, the herb spiral Daniel built, and the little gnome statue we named Gerald. I half expected her to laugh at it, to call it tacky. But she just nodded, eyes misty. This is beautiful, she said quietly. I didn't know if she meant the garden or my life, maybe both. They say wealth is measured in time, health, and love. I'd add peace to that list. And laughter. And the ability to look in the mirror without flinching. That summer, Daniel and I traveled to Italy, not first class, not with a tour group, just the two of us and our backpacks. We stayed in tiny Airbnbs, got lost in vineyards, and ate olives from a roadside stand. Every night, we journaled by candlelight. I wrote more than I ever had before, not about revenge. Not even about my family, but about resilience, about what it means to lose everything you were raised to value, only to discover your truest self beneath the rubble. One night, in Tuscany, I turned to Daniel and asked, "Do you ever wish your success was more known?" He smiled. Recognition fades. Fulfillment doesn't. I didn't just marry a man my family thought was beneath them. I married the man who showed me that character outlasts pedigree, that kindness outweighs credentials, that a name on a building means nothing if it's not built on respect. Them my father never visited. But he sent letters, more now than before. They no longer ask for forgiveness, they simply tell stories. About his childhood. His regrets. His garden. Sometimes, I write back. Other times, I just fold the letters and place them in a box marked before, because that's what that life feels like now. Another lifetime, another version of me. The truth is, I don't hate them anymore. I don't need to die have everything they couldn't give me, not because they wouldn't, but because they didn't know how. Love without condition, success without permission. A life without apology. So if you're reading this and wondering if choosing love over legacy is worth it, let me tell you it is, not because it's easy, but because it's yours, and that is the rarest wealth of all.